It's Thursday, it's 12:15 and we're live in Westminster. Joining me, Conservative MP Damian Collins, Labour MP Barry Gardiner, Plaid Cymru MP Liz Saville-Roberts and City AM editor Andy Sylvester. Today,
the problem in the House of Commons is ultimately the overall culture of long hours, bars, that can create a toxic mix.
After claims an MP watched porn in the Commons, what is the problem at Westminster? The Justice Secretary says people in prison should be called inmates, not clients. Also today, why are so few girls choosing to study physics?
I just think they don't like it. There's a lot of hard maths in there that I think that they would rather not do.
The Government Social Mobility Commissioner joins us live.
Will the Prime Minister support a lying in politics bill?
We'll ask my guest if that would really work. And why has China's biggest city been under lockdown for a month? Let's start with one of the stories you heard there in the headlines. Here it is in the Times. Call them inmates, prisons told in crackdown on woke words. This is reporting that the Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab, is asking staff in prisons to stop using terms like residents, clients and service users and instead to say inmates. He also wants to avoid staff using the word rooms rather than cells. To start the programme, Damian, what would you call them?
I would call them inmates because I used to work for an agency, an advertising agency, before I became a member of Parliament, and we used to call the businesses we work with clients. We provided a service to them, and they could go elsewhere. You know, prisoners by their nature can't go elsewhere. They're not receiving a service. They are inmates.
Barry, what would you call them?
Yesterday, the High Court ruled that the government had acted unlawfully in discharging our elderly relatives directly into care homes, spreading COVID at the beginning of the pandemic. This week, we've heard that 63,000 rapes were reported to the police last year, only 1% of which ever were charged, and less than 0.2% of which were actually resulted in a conviction.
And you think these are much bigger issues
this
to be
is a
discussing
distraction.
About, but
the Secretary for Justice is putting out a distraction about semantics. What do we call prisoners? Do we call them offenders?
What would you call them?
Look, I believe that the function of the prison service is to punish and to rehabilitate. And I believe that you do that by trying to inculcate a sense of respect in people. And therefore, I would call them offenders, but I would want to see that they were being treated with respect and not denigrated, because that's the way to rehabilitate people into society, to get them to accept that what they've done is wrong and to actually make a fresh start.
We were just seeing pictures there, Liz, of the Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab, on a recent visit to a prison. What word would you use to describe them?
I am one of the MPs who set up the Prison Service Parliamentary Scheme, and I have spent a number of days shadowing Prison Officers Association representatives and other prison officers in prison, in Swansea and Walton and in other prisons as well. I have never, ever heard a prisoner or an inmate being referred to as a client user, a client or a service user. It is, frankly, a distraction in the sense that rehabilitation is what we should be emphasising in justice. We should bear in mind that reoffending costs the public much in suffering and also £18 billion. This is an entirely unnecessary distraction and doesn't reflect what we need to be doing in the prison service and the probation service, which alongside which, of course, the dedicated officers who work in both those services have not had pay rises, work in terrible terms and conditions, and this will not make any improvement whatsoever either to the levels of reoffending or the sort of work that's being carried out in prisons. And frankly, in Wales, where, of course, health and housing and education are devolved, we would have a more effective prison service if those aspects also were devolved to Wales.
Right. Well, of course, the substance of this is, does it make a difference and will it work? Just to say that you haven't heard those terms being used.
I've never heard those terms
But certainly
being
in that
used.
report, they say that John McLaughlin, the governor, HMP Five Wells in Wellingborough, has used the words for prisoners to refer to them as residents, and also the first prison in Britain to have cell windows without bars. He said it was an attempt to normalise their time in prison. What do you make of it, Andy? I mean, is there a sense that there are members of the public who perhaps still feel that it's still too soft?
I mean, there are. You can see the politics of this. It makes sense, but I have to confess I'm minded to agree with Barry and Liz. I mean, you could call them crime face for all I care if the prison system was working properly and it was rehabilitating people. The reoffending rate in the UK for people who serve less than a year in jail is around 60%. That's not either punishment or rehabilitation. It is sending usually kids, often from ethnic minorities, into prisons where they are met by hardened criminals or gangs run from inside prisons who go out and they reoffend because they go out and they've got no opportunities. And it's a massive wasted loss of talent. I mean, it's slightly facetious, but I remember listening to a business owner tell me about one of his ex-offenders who was working for him, and he said it was the best accountant he'd ever had because he was selling drugs when he was 17. I mean, these are really talented people. And the prison system, as I say, I don't think it really matters what we call them. I can see the politics of it, but when you look at our prison system right now, it looks quite close to a national scandal.
We're returning to a story that broke, actually, while we were on air yesterday with the Prime Minister's Questions programme, and that is the alleged shocking, astonishing behaviour of a male MP in the Commons. Let's just show you this front page. Porn MP exposed. An investigation into allegations a Conservative MP watched pornography on his phone in the Commons chamber has been ordered by the Conservative Party's chief whip. That inquiry will be carried out by the Independent Complaints and Grievance Scheme. It's relatively new, set up as part of an overhaul of processes in Parliament. The whip's office says appropriate action will be taken once the investigation concludes. Damien, once it does conclude, if the MP is found guilty, is that the end of their political career?
Well, I don't think there's a place in Parliament for people that would watch pornography in the chamber of the House of Commons. I think it's totally unacceptable. Parliament should be setting standards, not, debasing itself in that way. So I think it's right that this is treated as a parliamentary matter, not just a party matter, because it's very serious. I think it relates to the conduct of any member of Parliament. But I would expect the Conservative Party would take, would take stringent measures against anyone who was found guilty of that offence.
Right. One of the issues, Liz, is the length of time it takes for this new body to actually investigate allegations and claims like this. I mean, this particular body looks at sexual misconduct, harassment and bullying. How long do you think the investigation should go on for?
I don't see why it needs to go to the Independent Complaints and Grievance Scheme, personally, because there's even a question whether this can be a third-party reference as well over to that scheme. And again, as one of the cross-party members who set up that scheme originally, we're very aware of the fact that parties have their own routes to deal with this. Two female members of Parliament, who are members of the Tory party, have approached the Tory chief whip. He is well equipped, therefore, to deal with this through party methodology, which would mean that it would happen far more swiftly. And I think it would better behove the Tory party to be seen to take this seriously rather than to be seen to kick this into the long grass as they are through the ICGS.
I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, my understanding is the Chief Whip has shared information that he's received with the authorities. I think this should be done at a Parliament level, and I think there's no reason why this can't be done swiftly. Right.
I mean, do you agree with that, Barry? Because this story today in BBC News, Women in Politics, Labour figures lewd comments to MP claim. I mean, it's the story about a Welsh MP that's spoken to BBC Wales about comments allegedly made to her from a member of the shadow cabinet. The MP, who doesn't want to be identified, claims she was described by this shadow frontbencher as a secret weapon because women want to be her friend and men want to sleep with her. Is this a party matter or both a party matter and should go to this new body?
Look, I think it goes to the heart of the culture that we have in the House of Commons. And the culture is wrong. It's not a professional culture. It's not treating colleagues as colleagues with respect. And we have to sort this out. I was speaking to a female Conservative member of Parliament just before, as I was walking over to the studio this morning. And she was saying that she's on a WhatsApp group with some of her colleagues, but all of the colleagues from the Conservative Party are male. And some of them on that WhatsApp group had said that the case of the MP looking at porn in the chamber clearly did not happen.
Right.
Well, it clearly did, because two Conservative women knew it had happened, and they said it had happened.
But the question is Liz's point. What about the party? I mean, should the Labour Party investigate this particular claim? I've already asked Damien. Yeah,
of course they should, because it's bringing our party, but more importantly, it's bringing politics into disrepute. Because if people think that MPs are not taking their jobs seriously, are not dealing with their constituents' casework, are not actually studying legislation and doing the critical work in select committees we should be doing, then they are no longer going to have faith in the laws that we promulgate.
Right.
And that's really important.
Liz?
Can I just come in with one point too? It seems to me that the Chief Whip of the Conservative Party doesn't trust the word of two of his MPs, who have obviously approached him very seriously, concerned about this, and expect something to happen. Now that, from your party's point of view, frankly, Damien, I'd be very concerned if I was a female MP
well, I
within
think
the
you'd
Tory
agree there
party.
should be some sort of proper process. If it's a very serious complaint, I think a complaint's been made about a member of Parliament, there should be a proper process in determining what happened and what action should be taken. I think it's right that the parliamentary authorities lead on that, and I'd expect the Conservative Party to act swiftly if that MP is found guilty and take the appropriate measures against that person. As I said, I don't think someone who would do that has any place in Parliament.
Right. I mean, it's interesting, Andy, that both Liz and Barry have said that this is an attempt to professionalise the Houses of Parliament because it is set up very differently in terms of employment and who's an employer and who's an employee, human resources and so on. But this new body was set up in the wake of the Me Too movement. Do you think it is nimble enough to deal with the sort of complaints that are now emerging?
Well, I think in the corporate world, in this particular instance, it would be suspension first, investigation later.
Right.
There's obviously a high-profile element to this in terms of privacy and so on, which are genuinely difficult to navigate. But clearly the body is not nimble enough. The whole point of a HR department is that, a HR body is that it responds quickly, because that's the only way you get to the bottom of cultural issues, is by stamping them out as soon as you possibly can. That's how you change a culture. It isn't like this is a 3-year process. It has to change pretty much overnight. But what I would say is, you've talked about the culture in Westminster, we've talked about all that. It's not really a surprise necessarily that these things still develop. You're right, this system hasn't moved fast enough. But the former Speaker, let us not forget, was a bully. We know this now, and yet his behaviour was accepted for political ends. So you have to think these things over.
That was John Bercow, yeah.
Can I add one further thing? And I think that is that whoever this Member of Parliament was, we need to think, what is their mental health? We need to think, do they have some issue, some addiction? Because this is not normal behaviour to do this. And actually, we should also be thinking, do they need to get counselling? And yes, of course, there's a disciplinary aspect to this, but there may be other aspects to it.
But would you accept the disciplinary element has to come first?
Absolutely, of course, and that's why I made the points that I did earlier. It absolutely has to do that. But Parliament also has a duty of care for the people who work there, and often it is not exercised. Now, that is primarily for the people who are being bullied and harassed and embarrassed by the behaviour that people like that man, whoever he is, have shown.
All right.
But it's also for that person themselves.
Briefly, Damien.
Just on the bullying point, which I think is really important, I think the issue the House has to have is, who do you complain to? If you work in the office of a Member of Parliament, who is your boss, there's no separate HR department necessarily open to you. Who do you complain to? The issue with the Speaker is that no one holds the Speaker to account for it. The Speaker is doesn't have to appear in front of the liaison committee, isn't beholden to anyone. And that's got to change too, because if someone is abusing their power, even if it is the Speaker, they have to be held to account by somebody.
We're going to talk about something else, which is the government's Social Mobility Commissioner, Catherine Burblesing, has been giving evidence to the Science and Technology Committee on an inquiry on diversity and inclusion in STEM subjects. Let's take a listen to some of what she said.
Girls are not choosing at least physics in the same proportion as boys might. What might be the reasons for that?
Well, like I said, I just think they don't like it. There's a lot of hard maths in there that I think that they would rather not do. And that's not to say that there isn't hard stuff to do in biology and chemistry. There is, but it's not.
Why would girls not want to do hard maths any more than boys?
The research generally, people, they say that that's just a natural thing. I mean, I don't know. I can't say, I'm not an expert at that sort of thing. We're certainly not out there campaigning for more girls to do physics. We wouldn't do that, and I wouldn't want to do that, because I don't mind that there's only 16% of them taking. I mean, I want them to do what they want to do.
Catherine Burblesing joins us now, head teacher at Michaela School. Hello to you, Catherine. You will know, of course, there's been a lot of criticism about the comments that we have just heard you make to that committee yesterday. Are you guilty of perpetuating a stereotype that girls just don't like hard maths?
Well, we were talking specifically about our school. And so I'd spent 20 minutes talking about the reasons why girls across the country might not choose STEM subjects. And I gave a whole host of reasons, like not having role models. And I said that these things needed to be addressed within school communities. I believe at Michaela we have addressed these things. They have a head of physics who is a woman. We, in 2019, with our Progress 8, we had the best maths results in the country. We also had the third best science department in the country. All of our children take double and triple science. Yes. They're extremely well taught and they have great behavior. And these are all the sorts of issues that I was saying, if you don't address these environmental and cultural issues, girls who are part of the sort of vulnerable groups will end up not choosing STEM subjects.
Right.
I then explained at Michaela, we have addressed these things and we have controlled for the environmental variabilities, which are an absolute issue and need to be addressed across the country.
Right, okay.
We have done very well here, which means that our biology and chemistry A-levels have got 65% girls. But it is still the case that in physics it's not.
Right.
And all children, girls and boys, when they don't take physics, they will say that they don't want to do the hard maths, they'd rather do biology. It doesn't mean that biology isn't hard, as I said.
No.
It is. It's
all right.
hard in different ways.
Well, let's...
And so
Catherine, I'm going to have to interrupt you here because I want to ask you a few more questions before we open it up for discussion. Yes. It's just that when you listen to the evidence you gave yesterday, you seem to now be saying it is a problem that you are addressing. When I listened to what you said yesterday, you didn't seem to think it was an issue that fewer girls were doing or taking physics A-level. No, fair enough. That they were taking...
You haven't listened to the 20 minutes before.
No.
So the point is...
I know, and you've just explained that. But you did say, you used the word natural, that you didn't necessarily think it was as natural for girls, perhaps, to do the hard maths and take physics as it was for boys. That will have alarmed people because you were then implying that actually girls naturally are not as able when it comes to numbers and maths as boys.
I didn't say able. I've never talked about able.
No, I said it's the implication of what you said by using the word natural.
No, but I was talking about choice. I was talking about what they choose, what they're interested in. I haven't talked about ability. There are great female physicists and mathematicians out there, and more power to them.
So why is it more natural? So why was it more natural for boys to take physics than girls?
So the evidence shows that girls, on average, are more empathetic and boys are more systematic. Now, that doesn't mean that there are no brilliant women who are very systematic and there are no boys who are very empathetic. Of course, there is a whole variety out there. But on average, that's how it works. So, you do have to look at the cultural issues. But I do think that there is a problem if we're thinking that our goal is to always have 50% girls and boys for every subject. Discrepancies do not mean necessarily that there is discrimination. Okay. Now, it's always important to look at discrepancies, as we have done, and then you need to address them. And we have addressed them. And when you control then for those variabilities within the environment, you can then look and think, well, perhaps their choice is genuine. And you want to make it so that all children are able to fulfill their potential.
All right.
I think it's wrong to seek exact representation.
All right.
But
let me put that point to you, Liz. I mean, do you accept what Catherine is saying there, that it isn't necessarily desirable to have something like quotas or to push people, girls in this case, into particular areas unless they want to?
I think what we've just heard now, very interestingly, from Catherine Burblesing, is a description of what she does in her school. but she also has a role as social mobility czar. And when you look at the highest status subjects for education remain amongst the STEM subjects. So you have physics, you have mathematics, you have chemistry. I believe chemistry is equally as challenging when it comes to mathematics. And it really concerns me then that using the platform, the very public platform which she used in Parliament yesterday, played along to that cliché that sciences are not for young women. And I think it's in her role as social mobility czar that really this needs to be addressed. It's not a matter of looking at, say, 1 year in her school has 30% boys and 60%, 70% girls. That proportionately, the statistics of that doesn't matter. Overall, we should be making sure that, for social mobility terms, that everybody, whichever their sex, whatever their background, that they have access to those high-status subjects. We should also be looking at the status of those roles which are traditionally male, which also happen to be STEM, and raising the status of those activities which were traditionally female.
All right, Catherine, do you want to respond?
But I absolutely agree with everything that you've just said. I did not do the things that you're saying. I was asked specifically about my school, and I answered specifically about my school. I spent 20 minutes doing exactly what you're just saying and talking about how we need to increase the opportunities for girls across the country and the ways in which I thought we could do so. So I agree with you. You know, it's just that people like to selectively listen, and the media in particular like to selectively quote, and they completely ignored all the other stuff that I'd been talking about. And I was asked specifically about my school, and I back my girls. Those girls at 16, 17 who chose not to take physics, I think they're absolutely right not to have done so. And that's okay.
All right, well, let me ask you, Andy?
I think there's a wider point here, which is that why would Catherine Baldwin want to be in politics anymore? Why would she want to do this social mobility role when she, clearly at Michaela, which has given more opportunities to more deprived kids in that part of London than just about any other institution, private or public, when she can talk about her school and her experiences and, for better or for worse, taken out of context, clunky language, etc., has to come on a day later and clarify. And she must just think, why am I bothering? Why not going back to the school? Why not do something I'm good at? And we do risk, I think, losing good people from public service.
Well, Catherine, you'll want to respond.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was clunky in my language. I was just, and of course, the media like to just, you know, take a particular thing and run with it. And I ought to have been thinking very carefully, and I should have been thinking they're press here and they're going to take it and they're going to want to use it against me. And the thing is, I'm not a politician. And so I just explain things as I see them. And I'm just quite natural about that. And I'm quite sincere. And I haven't planned what I'm going to say. And I'm not, I just don't think like that.
Barry?
And
no, that's fair enough. And that's an explanation, Catherine, about your style. But you have got this role too. Barry, do you accept that?
Yes, I do. I accept it totally. And I pay tribute to the work that she's done in Michaela. And I think she's right to say, look, I used clunky language, I'm not a politician. But I do think, because of her public role, she now has an obligation to get out there, as she's doing now, and to say, look, I wasn't saying what the newspapers have traduced me into saying. I was actually, I believe that this is a problem in society, and we need to be encouraging, just as I do at Michaela, need to be encouraging girls to take up stem cell subjects, to make sure they've got the appropriate role models, and really to use this barrier as a stepping stone, as a platform to be able to get the message out there more. And I hope that she'll take the opportunity to do that. It's not a matter of defending what she said. It's a matter of going out there and saying, look, I misspoke, or the way you've taken it has been wrong. Let me correct the record, and let me use this occasion as a means of doing that.
Damien?
Well, it feels like an extension of a family discussion. My daughter's 15 and she's very into art subjects like history and English, but is thinking seriously about doing
And what are you
physics.
saying to her?
Well, she's the one who's brought up doing physics at A-level, which we'd be very supportive of. But I think we shouldn't, however it happens, we shouldn't get drawn into a debate where it sounds like, you know, physics and maths are more subjects for boys than girls. You know, they're for anyone who has a passion for doing it. And what's interesting, when you look at the figures for STEM, people who do STEM subjects at degree level, is more girls than boys do. So clearly the girls that do STEM subjects at A-level fly at them and then go on to be more likely to go to university and take a degree in that subject. So I think we should see that as encouragement for more girls to take STEM subjects at A-level too.
Catherine, what do you make of what you've heard here?
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree with the reason I didn't have to go to the select committee. I went to the select committee to say, look, these are the ways in which we've made a success of biology and chemistry. I gave them advice about what I thought schools should do in order to increase representation of girls in STEM subjects and the ways we have succeeded at that. That's why I went there. You're right about my clunky language. And unfortunately, the media don't talk about that 20 minutes, They just go and they say one thing and they run with it.
No, well, as you know, we can't show everything all of the time. It was an important bit, and some scientists criticise the language, as you say, that you used, and there will be some people who will think it sort of masks what you really think, which you have explained, certainly in terms of Michaela School. In terms of the role of being Social Mobility Commissioner, Liz, do you think that is a good enough explanation, as far as you're concerned, to pursue the sorts of goals you clearly think Catherine should be doing?
I have a degree of sympathy with Catherine in the sense that she obviously strongly feels that her words were taken out of context. But for any of us in public life, and she has accepted a public role as being chair of the Social Mobility Commission, is that we do think about how our words are going to be taken. And this is a very sensitive subject. And many of us, people who have worked in education, have over decades been endeavouring to encourage more and more women into science subjects. And although this was a throwaway remark, possibly, I would beg the question that this was such a sensitive subject that it isn't just a matter for one school and the focus on one institution and what she has fantastically achieved there. This was bound to be taken in a wider context.
All right, final word, Catherine, briefly, and then thank you.
Oh, well, I mean, yes, I would just say that I spent 20 minutes talking about the whole country. There was a tiny little bit where they asked me specifically about my school, and I told them specifically what we do here and what I thought about those girls in physics here. I suppose I could have said at that point, but I'm not talking about the whole country. But you try to, but people misquote you. My whole life has been dedicated to ensuring that all children have access to fulfilling their potential, whether that's girls in science or ethnic minorities and a whole variety of subjects, inner city kids, poor kids, disadvantaged kids. That's what I'm all about. That's why I went to the select committee yesterday. I wish that my career that spans over 20 years would count for something when people hear something and they think, oh, does that sound like Catherine Burblesing? Or maybe I should ask the question first.
Well, and at least, Catherine, you've had today a platform to talk about it more widely. Catherine Burblesing, thank you very much. Liz, we saw you briefly in the headlines talking about lying in politics in the Commons chamber. You've also been writing about it. Let's take a look at this in Politics Home. It's high time we make willful lying by politicians a criminal offence. How exactly would it work in practical terms?
OK, in the first instance, do the checks and balances that we have in place in Westminster work as things stand? And I think that it will be generally agreed that they don't, that it is very easy to willfully put something out there which is proven by investigation to be false, and that there is no way of correcting that has the effect of changing the point of view. So as a legislature, if the checks and balances, the codes that we have in place at the present, which of course are dependent upon, if you like, a gentleman's code of honour, if that code of honour doesn't work, what then do you do?
All right.
If you want to convey to the public and those of us who are in public roles that the truth matters, what alternative is there but legislation?
Well, and just to sort of take you through how it would work in practice, lying by a politician would be, under this bill, a criminal offence.
Well, indeed, and very much so. If you look at the comparison with advertising standards, that we expect advertising standards to tell the truth, legal, decent, honest and truthful.
Right.
But
and so would it be up to the police then in that instance? So if I heard a politician lying, perish the thought, I would call the police.
There would always be the opportunities. I mean, the key word here is willfully. There's always the opportunity there for the individual politician to put the record right, to put the record straight. And, of course, anybody with any political nous would cease to put the record straight before they were told to do so, because then you manage that yourself. But if you actually want to enforce this, because at present the ministerial codes, the protocols, checks and balances, they're not working.
OK.
So what else, in the end, as the final check, and as an indication as legislature, that we take truth-telling as seriously as we tell our children to do so in school, that we ourselves take that seriously, actually, how is the way of doing that but by legislation?
Is this a good idea?
I mean, I think we would rather politicians didn't lie in public life, and I think we would, I assume, hope that the ministerial code, that gentleman's women's code of honour, is stuck to. And obviously, we all know what the context is over discussions around Partygate. But I am intrigued how this would work. I mean, it's local election season right now. Yeah, everybody who's received a Liberal Democrat leaflet in the past month will have seen an act of basically creative fiction in Lib Dem bar charts. They are a joke in British politics.
Well,
now.
they're not here, of course, to defend themselves, and we are going to have that example.
But every single party is as guilty of this as anybody else, of presenting facts in a certain way. And I wonder who would be in charge of this line of what is truth and where that line was crossed, because surely it's going to end up being, you know, a pretty... I don't see how it works. And fundamentally, the people who punish politicians who are found to lie in public life should probably be the voters. And they will have a chance to do that next week at local elections and at the general.
Liz?
What I would ask, really, is that we're seeing, I mean, anybody who's campaigning at the moment on the doorstep, we're seeing a general debasement of politics per se. We have, you know, compassion in politics, of polling that 47% of the people have lost trust, the public have lost trust in politicians. This is not a good place to be, and that we need to put lines in the sand as to what is acceptable behaviour. And again, the greatest power that we have is as legislators. We legislate.
Yes, you make laws.
And therefore, the codes that we have in place at present aren't working. We are devaluing our democracy. We are devaluing our politics. Using words lightly, politicians use words. If the words that we use are not accurate and we're not held to account for them in the short term, because that's not happening now, then the alternative is we never remedy this.
And you respond, and then I want to come to an example.
I completely agree with what you mean about trust in politics. It is hugely damaging. But it isn't just people playing fast and loose with the truth when they want to get out of an awkward question. It is the partisanship, it's the unwillingness to work cross-party, it is the fact that on every TV show you see politicians who broadly agree on 95% of the thing sort of decrying each other as if they could never be in the same room. And that, to me, that lack of willingness to work together, that is debasing politics as much as anything else. And I think there's a wider point here that is not going to be solved with the greatest respect by a law.
Liz, can I just bring up something that Andy said in his first answer on this, which is around what is said in leaflets during campaigning, because you'll be surprised to learn we have found a leaflet here. It was from a campaigning literature from the last general election. And this is Plaid Cymru. This is how much Labour takes Wales for granted. How much Labour plans to invest in Scotland? £100 billion. How much Labour plans to invest in Wales? Absolutely zero. Now, Welsh Labour were very cross about that particular... It was a tweet, actually. I apologise, not a bit of literature. They tweeted this. This is just a lie by Plaid. They know it's a lie, and yet we've announced £3.4 billion additional Barnett consequentials. That's annual, not spread over 10 years. Wales will also get its fair share of £650 billion provided through the... And you can read on and on. Was that a lie, the Plaid tweet?
Yeah, if it's Barnett consequentials, that's not from Labour?
What, Labour personally? You mean sort of like...
Yeah, but so Labour were going to spend absolutely £0 in Wales?
Barnett consequentials are what comes following the way that Wales is funded, based on what is devolved from here.
So Labour would have invested £0?
But actually, it was Labour's proposals to increase the investment which would have had those Barnett consequentials that the Labour Party was responding with. But look, can I just say...
Sounds like one for the Truth Commission.
Yeah, but hang on. Exactly. Yeah, but that's what I mean. If that was a lie or it was contested in the way that Andy raised the issue about what goes on in leaflets, is that something that should be prosecuted in the way that Liz would like?
If you'll allow me, I think Liz has very ably set out the problem. I don't think that the solution that she's proposing about trust in politics is the correct one, because of course, it's about giving the public confidence that truth is at the heart of what we do in politics, but there is also seriousness of purpose, and where here I think of the lie that is told every day in Parliament when we all stand up and say, my honourable friend makes an excellent point. Well, actually, it wasn't an excellent point. It was a bloody useless point. But you know, we're just trying to move on. Was it a lie? It was a polite way of moving on. but it wasn't correct. It
right.
wasn't the
But
truth.
there is a skip. Right. Well, Damien?
How can you arbitrate between, I think different opinions people may have, different facts people could use? We could all sit around this table and talk about any number of subjects and portray them in entirely different ways to suit a political argument. And also, we shouldn't assume that just because a politician says something that people believe them as well. So I think, I think ultimately the voters use their judgment. But I think also it's right that within the existing ministerial code, for a minister to knowingly mislead Parliament is a serious matter already.
All right, let's take another example, because obviously there was a sense of disagreement. You could found, though, with that tweet that, let's say, the police agreed with Labour that Plaid had lied, and then somebody is going to be prosecuted. But let's have a look at this one. It's a little more up to date. This is Matt Hancock, the former Health Secretary. You referenced the High Court ruling at the beginning, but this...
And indeed, I raised this with Matt Hancock in the chamber.
Right. Now, this is something that he said at the Downing Street press conference in May 2020. Right from the start, we have tried to throw a protective ring around our care homes. Liz, what do you make of that statement? Is it a lie or not?
The word tried gives him a lot of wriggle room there.
Right.
But nonetheless, it implies that there was a particular duty of care, if you like, to care homes. And I think then it is our job as politicians to throw up the evidence, to find the evidence that we can.
But it illustrates how difficult it is, isn't it? I mean, to actually say that was a lie or that is the truth. We have tried to throw a protective ring around our care homes.
But then I would
tried and failed, maybe, in your mind, or...
I would expect a minister then to exemplify that. What does that mean? What are the examples that actually show... Because you can use a protective ring, and what do you mean by that? What does that actually mean for the residents of care homes?
This is the issue here, because actually it's right that people make judgments on policy. Ministers say they're going to do something. Have they been successful in doing it? I think trying to unpick the nuances of every word someone has said and trying to make it a criminal matter, I think, is impossible.
Can I just say, my local council, Brent Council, actually did not allow direct discharges from hospital into care homes. They set up a separate triaging place for people to be discharged to. And I raised this with Matt Hancock in the House. I said, you said that you threw a protective ring around care homes. Brent Council actually did. But why, if Brent Council could see that this was the right thing to do, did the government not? Now, that seems to me a failure of the government's foresight and policy. Right. It doesn't seem to me primarily a criminal offence of lying. It's a criminal offence. The High Court have found that they were illegal in what they did.
Yeah.
But that's a matter that the High Court has found on the substance, not on the Member of Parliament's use of language.
Indeed. But on, then, the issue that is being proposed by Liz.
On lying, I mean, it's an interesting position because every newspaper I put out has to be 100% copper-bottom true as far as we know, and if it isn't, we are held to account. Politicians do have a ministerial code, of course, and they have the voters. We're talking about legislating around lying in politics, and Damien will know all too well. The social media platforms, which are not particularly regulated, do not take responsibility for the lies, misinformation and utter tosh, which is all over that platform. And perhaps we could start by regulating there, and that might do more for the reputation of politics than
well, let's just end on that point. We're going to talk about China. Its most populous city, as you will know, Shanghai, has been under strict lockdown for about a month in a bid to stop the latest COVID surge in the country. Residents haven't been allowed to leave their homes. Take a listen to this. That's footage circulating online which showed people screaming from their balconies, with the person filming claiming it was because people had grown tired of China's strict lockdown rules and actually were starving, some of them, because they couldn't get food. Let's talk to the Spectator's Cindy Yu. She's also the host of the podcast Chinese Whispers. Hello to you, Cindy. Explain to us what's been happening in Shanghai.
So Shanghai is one of those cities in China which actually has been relatively pro-living with COVID. And it's for that reason that when the COVID cases, when Omicron started to seed in the city earlier this year, the authorities actually resisted for a fair amount of time, for some weeks, saying, you know, we don't need to shut down. We are the economic heart of China. And so the cost of shutting down will be really, really high. Eventually, though, they were overruled either by central government or just because the cases grew so large. So at its peak, unfortunately, the city is down from the peak now, but at its peak, Shanghai had around 27,000 cases in one day, which, you know, in the Chinese circumstances is unheard of because of how successful the zero COVID policy has been in that narrow sense of just limiting infections. So it then locked down. It at first said it was locking down for a few days. So people who trusted the government didn't really stockpile any food or anything like that. And then it extended it indefinitely. And so, as you say, we are now in its fourth week. And a lot of people are struggling to get enough resources to them, to their households. It's not just food, you know, it's stuff like baby formula, it's stuff like toilet paper, it's stuff like medicines. There have been also on social media reports of people, elderly especially, who have been struggling to get vital medicines. Sorry, go on.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, why is China so wedded, then, to this policy? They will obviously know there is a certain amount of dissent, certainly in Shanghai.
Yeah, that's particularly true for Shanghai because the population is so educated. It's the most middle-class city in the country. So, you know, people are going to make their voices heard, basically, and which is what they have done. I think they're so wedded to it because the vaccination rollout has not been hugely effective. For one, the Chinese vaccines are not as highly effective as Pfizer and the other Western alternatives anyway. But even so, they are effective. Even so, the rollout has not been complete because of the complacency brought on by the zero COVID policy, China hasn't been prioritizing vaccinating the elderly. There has been no nudges. There's been no such thing as vaccine passports. There's been no compulsory vaccination. Even the rollout itself was completely voluntary to the extent that if you're elderly, it wasn't age prioritized at all. So, you know, you've got this data coming out which shows that around 40% of over 80s are not vaccinated at all. And so that means that when something like Omicron comes along, it really only has zero COVID as a short-term strategy. Okay. The question is it going to improve vaccination for future when something like this happens again?
And we'll stay with this because we're going to open it up to discussion. I mean, Damien, listening to what Cindy is saying, people might be watching thinking, why can't China, a government which exerts so much control over its citizens, why haven't they been able to either change course from a zero COVID policy when it clearly is causing so much pain in a city like Shanghai, or done better on its vaccination?
Well, I think it shows you can't, you know, no party can decree a zero COVID policy. Politicians can't stop COVID spreading around the world in the way that it's done. It shows why, you know, at the time, if you go back to the start of the pandemic, people were saying, oh, look at the Far East, look how they've locked down. You know, Shanghai was reopening when we were still in lockdown. You know, we should have been much tougher. Actually, the way to deal with it was always vaccination. It was giving people the protections they would need so that we can live with COVID in the future. And I think, you know, there are lots of things about the pandemic that people could debate and discuss, but the one big thing we really got right was recognising very early on that vaccination was going to be the way out of the pandemic.
Liz?
They're varying, worrying pictures to see coming out, and I think also, hopefully that we're going to touch upon as well, is the implication of that for the UK as well, because so much of our trade being with China and for have Shanghai shut down now for so long, I mean, it has borne the question of whether we're going to have the same problems again with supply chains and trade with China, what the effect of that is going to be and how we need to be preparing for that. It isn't just, although you know, it's really distressing to see some of those pictures there, but it isn't just something that's happening far away and is distant to us. This is going to have implications for the UK as well here.
Andy?
Liz is absolutely right. It has a huge supply chain implication. It's going to be further inflationary pressure. Every morning we get our corporate updates from the stock exchange from companies reporting, and they are all referring to inflationary pressure. It will hit people at home. But more broadly, you look at China. In a way, there's an element, and Cindy alluded to it there, talking about it being the most middle-class city. People have always said that economic freedom creates a desire for political freedom. The argument with China, the argument for engagement, has always been that as people get richer, they will demand more from their government. And maybe we're starting to see that. And for my money, that's very good news.
That's all we've got time for. Thank you, Cindy. Sorry we didn't go back to you, but thank you very much for joining us. I'll be back tomorrow with the Politics UK at 12:15. But from all of us here, have a very good afternoon and thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.